Hi, Nicole. How you doing? All right, let's go ahead and take a look. I was reading your writing here. Um, Thanks for including this. So this gives me a good idea of where to start with the critique. So let's go ahead and jump right over to the work. I've got a lot of comments, so I'm going to be throwing a lot at you here in the next couple minutes. So just bear with me, and this might indicate that you might have to watch this video twice, just because I'm going to throw a lot at you right now, Nicole. So bear with me. Okay, so we're going to start with the cover. The first thing I want to mention is that could end up being a problem in trifold brochure when you bleed an image. When I say bleed, I mean bleeding off the edge, margins, top and right in this particular case, but you're also bleeding into what would be considered the next panel. And so it's not technically a full bleed, right? Because it's not running into the next panel, but it's bordered right on the fold of that panel. What does that mean? That means that if this fold isn't perfect when it comes to production, you're going to either get a little sliver of white on the front cover or a little sliver of image on the middle panel. Just, do you see what I'm saying? Depending on how that fold goes. So trying to bleed things, excuse me, or run elements or graphics right up to where the fold is problematic in trifold brochure design. So think about that. And same thing with the little this kind of arc right here as well. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that it could be very, very problematic. I mean, for me as a designer, if I have a trifold brochure assignment where I have 100,000 copies that are to be distributed, I would not risk production mistake and including a little sliver of white. I would not bleed it if I had that kind of job. That's me. That's a personal preference. If you feel confident, go ahead and do it. But please be aware that it could be a production problem in the end. Front cover looks good. Excuse me, good relationships, image and logo relationships. Good job there. Good spatial relationships. I think the front is assembled nicely. If anything, I think maybe the logo could possibly be a little bit too large, and I think that this type right here could be a little bit too large. I don't see any advantage in presenting the contact information in bold. Conversely, yeah, you've got the map on the back. This is contact. This is all important information, contact information. It would make sense to group this contact information on the back panel and just leave the front panel open. Use a lot of negative space and white space to enhance that beautiful logo. So, maybe place the logo alone with the image, the swoop, or what the arc, or whatever other embellishments or designs you decide to use on the front, design elements on the front. Okay, and then the back and typographically, I highly recommend you don't center align this type. It's just too hard to read. These negative spaces right here are really creating unusual shapes in the design, and it's really, really difficult to read center justified type. I should say justified type. It's difficult to read justified type because there's no common margin to jump back. So you've got these unusual spaces, right? And I think justified type should be used very, very, very sparingly as a designer. I mean, the only time I ever use center aligned or justified type is when there's just a very limited amount of type, or for a very formal something like a wedding invitation. But something like this is just really, really impedes readability and legibility. So I do not recommend that. Plus, you get a lot of problems like this right here. Okay, so you've got center aligned with you got justified type with the last line centered. So this is really unusual. You've just got this the day over here, or this is even a better example of problems associated with this kind of typeset is that right now you've got a hyphen here, so the rest of the word just sits down there. As that looks really odd because it's just a truncated version of orientation. It just says station. It's just really, really unusual. So for these reasons, I do not recommend justifying your type. If in any particular case you need to justify type, I would really, really think about the type settings to eliminate any kind of unusual spaces that quite often. Actually, you know what? I take that back. This is not justified type. This is center aligned. That's even more problematic than justified. Justified type establishes straight left and right margins, where center align type just has this kind of symmetrical space around that. I'm sorry I didn't notice that the first time around, but yes, you do not want a center align type. And again, we got these situations here problematic. And if you do want to learn about justified type, go to the announcements this week's announcements, and go to how to justify paragraphs correctly. Okay, so I think you've got some good hierarchy here, but think about this big space right here to be left blank. You can distribute that space throughout this panel, and just to redistribute the weights associated, and try to create further hierarchy based on negative space, and also use negative space as a design element and not just leftover area, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll go through typography in a second. I just want to continue on layout. So you're not leaving any margin area at all inside the individual panel. So this fold right here, you can see you've got part of your type is just creeping right up on that fold. We can see the same thing in here too. I mean, this is so close to that fold. If that fold is right here, boy, wow, you guys, there's no margin for error in there whatsoever. If that fold misses, either this is part of this type is going to be on the left panel, or part of this typography is going to be on the right panel. You see what I'm on the center panel? You see what I'm saying? So close down your margins. Give yourself ample margins in each panel. Okay, not just margins for the entire document, but each panel should have consistent margins. Okay. The infographic, I think, is pretty good. Now, there's going to come a point in time where I mean, I would have, this looks like, I'm not real sure if you created this infographic. It's really, really beautiful. So good job there. If it's not created, you might consider creating your own, so that you can call this a completely original piece, as opposed to placing a infographic from the website. That's just food for thought. I'm not saying you have to change this. I just want you to think about that as we move for inclusion of this piece in your final student portfolio. Theoretically, you could have a question in portfolio review, or even with a potential hiring professional looking at this piece in your portfolio saying, oh, is this an original graphic, or is this a placed graphic? And if you were to say, you can imagine the impact if the response were, yes, I created that myself. So that's just food for thought. I mean, that's I'm kind of nitpicking a little bit in that regard, but just, again, food for thought. Keep it in mind. Okay. Let's look at your typography. Okay, so these boxes, you don't want to place your headlines in boxes. You want to create hierarchy on some of the contrasts that we studied so far in creating hierarchy and leading the viewer through the composition. But you don't want to have to rely on placing things in boxes to create hierarchy. Try to create hierarchy based on differences in scale and any kind of contrast based on scale and or weight. Again, also proximity and alignment in assisting you in establishing good, solid hierarchy. Okay, so typography, again, I do not recommend center aligning this. But let's go ahead and take a look at the typeset itself, which is really difficult in center align. This is unusual here. This kind of hyphen that where you come to the next line and you just get NERS. You see what I'm saying? It presents a little bit of a problem. Okay. That's technically a widow. Technically, that's a widow. That's a widow. Let's bring that up a little bit. Okay, this is really strange right here, because right now you have Thrive DC's dinner program offers a safe peer support, and then support is hyphenated, but in the next line it goes into italic. So you've changed from traditional Roman set to italic in the middle of a word, and that's really unusual. I would definitely recommend not doing that. Don't forget, we have use of N spaces, I'm sorry, N dash and M dash and a regular dash. This is a regular dash. That's a span of numbers. That should be an N dash. N as in Nancy. And again, excuse me, if you go to the announcements, dash, M dash, N dash, old style figures, small caps. I recommend applying all of those where applicable in this particular layout. So you've got old style figures you can set for your numbers. N dash right there. All of your dashes should be appropriate. Again, that has a number. That should be an N dash. PM could be set as small caps instead of all caps. So anywhere you're using all caps or small cap or all caps, consider using small caps, with the exception of the infographic, of course, which isn't editable. So you can't go in there and change those. These are set at all caps, and I don't see any area there that would be indicative of setting up small caps. But definitely PM small caps, AM small caps. I can't really see any other areas that would be applicable for small caps. OCP, small caps, and so on and so forth, okay? And then M dash, N dash, dash, try to use those appropriately. And that, again, those are all covered in that. This is another, in that announcement, this is another problematic area of center aligned. These bullets don't work. Bullets are supposed to align the facts. So you can look at the bullet and find the next line. Look at the bullet, read the line. So this kind of alternating pattern right here doesn't really work with bullets. Can you see that? Okay, oh, right here, this should be set off a little bit. Okay, that's an asterisk indicating that that's something a little different than body copy. So you want to indicate that. Maybe set that in italic, maybe make it smaller type, something to make the viewer aware that that is not part of body copy, but it's indeed some sort of a supplementary element based on this asterisk right here. Okay, so those are my recommendations. Go ahead and get started on those, and really think about how you can apply some dynamic choices and elements in the layout itself. For example, these headlines right here, instead of boxes, you could use the color blue to indicate that those are a higher area of prominence in terms of hierarchy than other areas. So really think about this. Think about applying the rules of typography, the rules of good composition, then the rules of typography, hierarchy, and composition. So that's basically what we're looking at. And keep in mind my comments on production as well. All right, so great start. If you have any questions at all, please let me know, and I'll be glad to make any necessary clarifications. Thank you very much.